You are listening to the first episode of We Have Issues, the best comic podcast ever. Probably not the best or ever really. It'll be quite good. It'll probably be quite good. Well, it'll be good. Well, I mean, it's the first one, and we haven't done any podcasting in a while, so kind of wish I hadn't started this now. You are listening to the first episode of We Have Issues, a new podcast about comics. I'm really sorry. You should listen to the music now, and we'll do the show proper in about 30 seconds.
Swimming lessons.
No, do you have swimming lessons?
I have swimming lessons.
Can you swim?
Yes, I could swim anyway, but I couldn't swim how normal people swim. Wow, like properly. I could swim.
Like you couldn't swim good?
Yeah, and I'm not scared of water or anything like that. So, but I want to be better at swimming. So I've got lessons and got a really good group and I've got a really good teacher and stuff. But it turns out I'm really good at picking stuff up quickly because I used to be quite sporty and stuff. That someone gives me instruction.
You can just pick it up.
I can just do it. So I'm moving groups. So I'm moving up to the widths groups. I'm going in the big pool because I'm in the baby pool at the moment.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
I find it embarrassing how bad I am at swimming. I've gone through phases, and I'm not very good at picking up physical stuff. I'm normally not too bad at picking up systems if I'm doing like repetitive tasks, but physical stuff, my coordination's not great. So swimming, I've got a long and storied history with, which can pretty much be summed up by a couple of things. The first thing is I once jumped in a swimming pool and nearly drowned because when I was about 13 or 14, because I was peer pressured into it by a girl I fancied. Strictly speaking, by a girl and a guy who was trying to get this girl to pretend she liked me. It was all a bit complicated. It was a bit weird, but there was kind of this, she will really like you if you jump in the deep end of the pool. And you know how teenagers are stupid. So I did that and I nearly drowned, which was interesting.
Because you couldn't swim?
I couldn't swim very well. I probably couldn't swim at all, really. And when I was much young, and I got to go over for about half a day. You know how it is when you're that young. Half a day? Yeah. We didn't really go very far. We didn't get very far. I maybe got a kiss on the cheek. So that's like first or second base, isn't it?
No.
What's second base?
Second base is on top of clothes groping.
Oh, up top groping.
No. As in, there are different definitions, but the definition of first base is kissing, like on the mouth. Second base is over the clothes touching. Third base is under the clothes touching. And fourth base is sex.
Right. I did not know it was, I guess because 4 bases is baseball, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. I didn't think I knew that it literally went up to 4 bases. Okay, yeah, I don't think we even got to first base. But I was still heartbroken.
Oh.
And you have to go a little bit further back in my swimming career to we were doing swimming lessons at school, so all of the kids were there, and I didn't like PE anyway. And because I wasn't very good at swimming and because I just couldn't seem to pick it up at all, the teacher thought that what I needed was, and you might not even have known these existed, or you might have, and I might have told you about this before, Jane, because we have known each other a while. It's like a giant fishing hook. It's like a rod.
Oh yes, you have told me about this.
With like harness.
It's incredibly mortifying.
It is, in front of all of the girls and boys in my year, in my class. Definitely, I was in this harness, and the teacher was walking around the side of the pool while I was.
See, how lazy is that teachers wouldn't get in the pool with you?
I think that's awful. Maybe they're not allowed to because of touching.
Well, not back then. They were all touching, weren't they?
Yeah, no, that's true, to be fair. I never got molested, but I understand that it was something that was going on quite a lot.
Do you feel left out?
Sometimes, when I think back, I think maybe Maybe not. Maybe this isn't the best way to greet new listeners. This is the show. I think we're in the show, Jane.
All right.
It's always the best way to start a show. We're fine. The
Good.
longest sound check ever. Listener, you are listening to the first episode of We Have Issues. It's a podcast about comics. This is the first episode of this show. This is We Have Issues. We will be weekly. You'll be able to find the show at wehaveissues.net should you like this episode and want to explore more. You'll also be able to find it on iTunes and all the other places you expect to find passable, slightly above average podcasts. You'll be able to find it
Competent.
there. I will very briefly mention, although we're not going to go on about it, Jane and I and our friend James, who isn't here today, have done something like between us 250 episodes of another show called Momcast. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. If you haven't listened to it, you can go listen to that. But yeah, that's where Jane always used to say comic book. I can't say it. Comic book. I'm pretty sure I'm missing out consonants.
I don't know. Maybe you're just not used to it.
Maybe I'm just not used to it.
Maybe just us kids.
Maybe. As Jane has alluded to there, I'm very old.
You're not very old. You're just older.
Older than Jane. Jane is a young buck on the comic and podcasting scene. That's not true. We've been podcasting almost as long as each other. I'm Nick. You can find me mainly on Twitter because that's where I spend most of my time at Nixsight, NIXSIGHT. Jane.
Hello, you can find me on Twitter. I'm not on it as much as Nick, and I'm at Cover Jane. It's all one word.
Cover Jane.
Yeah, Cover Jane.
That's pretty cool. I like it, actually.
I don't know what made me think of it, but I was like, Cover Jane. I think it was just a cover name.
I like it.
I might keep it there. That's yeah.
There's also a Twitter account for this show. At the moment, it doesn't have anything. It'll probably be mainly used for announcements, and that's Issues Pod, ISSUES Pod. We are British. That's why I talk funny. If you're listening to us from overseas, I talk funny. Jane talks a bit nicer than I do. Apparently, I talk monotonously.
Oh, I've been told that in the office I work, me and one other lady were the two posh people in our department, which they obviously haven't spoken to some of the other people that are way posher than us.
I'm quite middle class. I've earned it.
You've earned it.
Somebody tried to insult me on Facebook by calling me middle class, and I was kind of like, look, I didn't finally own my own house at the age of 38. So I'm not going to feel guilty about that. There's nothing you can do to make me feel bad about that. So it's not true. I feel guilty about that and lots of other things.
Isn't that middle class guilt? Doesn't that mean
you made
it?
Middle class, and I'm practically white, and I'm straight and I'm male. So there's all the guilt. You only have you're straight and white. So you've got a little bit of guilt.
How about mixed?
You're a bit foreign too, aren't you?
Yeah, but I am white, I guess.
Yeah, we pass.
Yeah.
We pass quite nicely.
Quite often people think I'm German, but other than that...
When I was younger, people thought I was Pakistani.
Wow.
It was interesting growing up.
Yeah.
In a small English town.
Yeah.
It was about as much fun as you'd think.
Wow.
When you know that you're in the sticks when I am the most foreign person at the school, things have gone a bit awry.
And they can't even get your nationality or heritage correct.
Teenagers are fucking idiots. Sorry if you're a teenager. I didn't mean to.
Oh, and
say that.
swears.
Yeah, should have warned you about that. We are explicit. There's one word we won't say. We're not going to say it. But if you don't like swears, and if you don't like stories about genitalia, that's another thing that seems to come up sometimes.
Or weeing.
Or weeing.
Or pooing.
Or pooing.
Or medical conditions.
Some people
can be squeamish about that.
Yeah, and if you hate comics,
this probably isn't for you.
Probably not the show for you. But if you like all of those things, in fact, would join the fan club for each and every one of them.
You're in for a treat.
You'll probably love this one. Just because some people might not have listened to us before, I think it's worth us just talking about why we want to talk about comics. I mentioned I'm really old. I'm not really old. I had my 41st birthday.
Oh, I thought you were still 40
a couple of months ago. Sometimes I pretend.
Does it feel good?
Nice. Yeah, it feels pretty good.
6 months younger, you're like, yeah.
Do you know, I think I hit my sexual peak at 40.
Wow.
It's not true.
Oh.
It isn't true. Things are slowing down, but at the same time, the urge is going as well. So that's probably not the time to talk about that. Maybe wait till people know us a bit better. No, us. That makes it sound like my libido is your problem.
Yeah.
Jane and I aren't a couple.
And I don't have some weird tie to his libido.
No, that should be established right now. James and Jane also aren't a couple, despite them sharing a surname for quite some time.
Yeah.
We will at some point mention life partner Steve.
Yeah.
He is Jane's life partner, not my life partner.
No.
There is a cast of thousands related to the podcasts we collectively do.
Yes.
Some of them are made up. A lot of them are real people. You'll get to know them, listener. It's fine. Yeah, so I'm 41, which means I've been reading comics for about 35 years.
Wow.
Because, maybe even longer, I don't know. Because I've lived in England my entire life, that means that my main experience of comics early on was British comics. Mm-hmm. My granddad used to give me these American comics but they were old Laurel and Hardy comics and stuff like that, and Sad Sack and stuff like that. So they were quite fun and interesting, and I got used to comics through something other than superhero comics.
Yeah.
And one thing that anyone who knows British comic fans will probably have heard about anyway is that our comic scene here is really vibrant. There are lots of creators here. There aren't that many comics published here anymore, but there are lots of creators. And in the 70s and 80s, there were an awful lot of magazines coming out, but none of them were really superhero comics. We'd get reprints of American stuff. So I knew Spider-Man and Superman and all of that stuff, but I really learnt about comics through 2000 AD and Eagle and those Laurel and Hardy comics. And so I always kind of had a sense of it as a medium rather than being a particular sort of thing, a superhero thing. And then I was on holiday in Wales.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was very young. I didn't know what was going on. And it was I love Wales. Why would we even? That's awful. Why do we hate Wales so much?
No, I'm just not a fan.
Yeah. The Welsh are kind of, I like them. I fancied so many Welsh women. I know that shouldn't be the measure of a place, but really. But yeah, so at the time I was too young to really know any better, and it was raining the whole time, and I was only a little kid. So one of the friends of the people that we were staying there with just turned up with this big, because this was back when no one was worried about how much comics were worth, which was before the 90s. Nobody really thought, oh, I've got a pile of old comics in my cupboard. Those are probably worth a bomb. So what actually happened was I got given something like 100 Marvel reprint comics.
Wow.
Just in a bundle to read over the summer. And it was just instant love. I used to read a lot when I was a kid, just generally. Yeah. But then I had comics and it felt like I didn't need anything else. And I do a bit of writing and stuff like that. So I really like comics from a creative point of view. But, I like reading, but it's a lot of effort.
You've got an eclectic taste as well, haven't you?
I try to.
You like a range of comics.
I am very eclectic, yes. And I don't know what that voice is. I shouldn't really stray into voices. I can't really do them. But yeah, so I love how immediate it is. Like, comics, when they're done right, are so accessible that anyone can pick them up and just...
And they appeal to more than one sense, if that makes sense. It's not just not like the sort of taste for the story or the eagerness for the plot. It's also the visual aspect as well. Comics just always, the overwhelming majority of comics have just amazing art and colour in them as well. So it's an overall experience with them.
Yeah, it is. They're just, when they're done right, you don't, I don't want to dismiss the writer's work, because I think writers are super, super important, and not every artist can do a comic by themselves, because not all of them are great storytellers. But a really good one if everyone's working together, you don't even really need to understand the language they're in. You can still get what's going on from looking at the panels, from looking at the art, and I love them.
Yeah.
What about you, Jane?
I'm not a newbie anymore, but I've been into comics for about 5 years now, I think it's been. It wasn't very long before we started the previous show, Moncast, that I was into them, and it was because James, who isn't here, would walk home with me, because where I was living was near the comic book shop, so we used to walk home. Well, I used to walk home and used to walk to the comic shop. And occasionally I would go in with him if we were talking about something interesting. And actually it was in there that he was just like, oh, you should have a look around. And Why the Last Man was my sort of, breakthrough drug, I guess. Brilliant. Gateway drug, isn't it? Yeah. Really, oh God, it was such an incredible story. And I didn't have a negative feeling towards comics at all. I just they weren't in my peripheral. They weren't anywhere, To be fair, comic book shops are usually quite obscurely placed and not really in the mainstream. Definitely not as much as they are in the last 5 years. It's radically changed with the superhero movies that have come out. And also some of the movies that come out based on more of the indie comics as well.
Yeah. There's been a lot of that going on.
Yeah. And so for a while I was picking up trades, and then I was invited to do Moncast and ended up getting a weekly addiction for the show.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
From James, that's James's.
And both of you. And I think I tended, still now, but definitely back then, I really wasn't into the mainstream Marvel or DC stuff. I was really not interested in superheroes. I, fell in love with Becky Cloonan, and when she was working on Demo and her art, I tended to follow artists more. Probably because that was a thing that really sort of not shocked me, but kind of really stuck with me, is how amazing the art was. And I don't think I was expecting it. I always thought it was going to be more cartoony than it was.
Yeah.
So I sort of stuck more with the Vertigo and the Image side of things. Then the New 52 came out, and I sort of gave myself a little challenge to try and pick up some of the New 52 and see how I felt with that. I still do. They don't have the place in my heart, other than Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's amazing. They don't have the place in my heart as the Image series I've read or the Vertigo series, but my taste has developed. It is broadened as I've got more into comics, got into sort of, especially, obviously we're doing this because we're massive fans of comics, so following the creators that we really like as well and seeing what they're doing. I mean, with Vertigo introduced me to Scott Snyder as he was doing American Vampires, and then the DC stuff he did, I followed that. I kind of sort of blindly follow people whose writing or art I really enjoy, because you get so sort of, you crave it so much that you miss it. So when new things come out, you're just like, oh great, I don't care what it's about. I just want another fix of their talent. So it's kind of just sort of snowballed from there, really.
Image, it's been a really good time to get into comics.
Yeah.
It's not just Image, actually. A lot of other smaller companies are starting to do really interesting things.
Are, yeah.
And it's amazing, because I don't know as much about comics as I used to, but I still keep track of most of the things that are going on. But you and I can be talking about something that I feel like everybody's been talking about, and you won't know what it is, but then you'll bring a book to Spotlight that I have never heard of before. And it's become, I don't know if everyone will agree with us about this, certainly not some of the people who are trying to make a living off comics, but it's become such there's such a variety of stuff.
There is. Yeah, absolutely.
So much diversity. There could be more diversity, but diversity of work, all sorts of different styles and stuff.
But also there's the British indie scene, or British small press scene, which is actually huge here. It really is huge. And there's obviously conventions that we've been to, Thought Bubble being one, which celebrates small press creators.
And very small, like very short, tiny creators.
And very tiny creators too.
There's a whole little room to the side that's all tiny
just
people.
Just for tiny people, yeah. And we've met people through the podcast and through going to sort of the conventions and other events, and again, amazing like-minded people, which makes it, makes more of your fandom, come through, because, you're getting to meet amazing people that create these amazing things that you really enjoy. So all of that is, in that sense, it's been quite accessible for us as well. There's obviously big names that go to these as well. So you get to actually see your hero who, has been doing this amazing story, and you just don't understand where they get their ideas from, or someone whose art's just so incredible. You just, you couldn't even dream that anyone could ever draw like that.
I never end up talking to them because I'm too scared. And I know a lot more of those sorts of people on Twitter than I do to talk to kind of on Twitter than I do, and I get nervous of queues. You've been a little bit better about queuing up to meet them.
I do prefer meeting people because, they're there for a reason. Obviously, they're there because they're getting paid, but also, they wouldn't be in the industry. Well, I can't speak for everyone. In my opinion, I feel that the majority of them wouldn't be in industry if it wasn't for the fact that the kind of interaction that they get with the fans. A lot of them really, really like the feedback, because it's, it's validation that what they're doing is really good, that people are really enjoying it. And that's going to be amazing. There's very few industries where you can think that could actually happen, genuinely happen, as in genuine people saying this is amazing and actually them interacting with them back. It just, you can't imagine all the celebrities in film and TV are not really, there is an air of they're above talking to the person, talking to the man.
No, you're absolutely right. And this is something that's come up on, I've been talking to some people on Facebook about comic conventions, actually. The scene in the UK, we go off topic sometimes. The scene in the UK is really different to the convention scene in the US, where people have tried to do conventions here that have lots of multimedia, lots of TV people and film people at them. But generally in the UK, those are a different thing. They end up being a different thing. Yeah. Whereas in the US, I think Comic-Con, people always complain, has been taken over by a lot of the movie stuff. It just doesn't happen here. They're very comic-centric places.
I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've never been to Comic-Con, but from my impression, you don't have that accessibility to TV and film people. They're in panels, so they're sitting up on a stage, and you get to ask them questions, but you don't get to have like a one-on-one little chat with them about something whilst they're signing something. It doesn't, the big stars, but whereas the big comic creators, you could, the people that are really, for instance, Dan Slott, when he was doing Spider-Man, he was at the London Super Comic Con last year, and he had a horrendous queue, but he spent time with everyone. He was signing books and having a chat with them, and people were just so thrilled that they got to meet him. He's people's heroes. He writes he writes for their favourite character. He's writing amazing stories for them. He was making people's days, whereas that just wouldn't happen with the film and TV stardom.
That's the impression I get, definitely.
Yeah, I could be completely wrong, but from what I've seen and from people's recollection, or talking to people who've been to Comic-Con, that seems to be what it's like, which that's absolutely fine. But yeah, you're right, in the UK it's definitely not, it's geared more towards the actual comics rather than anything to do with film and TV.
I should this is a good point, actually, I should have mentioned some of this before. In the interests of full disclosure, we do tend to favour, I'll do a few things at once, that I should have done at the beginning. We do tend to favour Thought Bubble.
Yes.
It's the first convention we went to as a group, and it's my favourite in the UK, I think. Although I haven't been to loads. We also really like...
Been to all of them.
Have you? We've been to all of the Thought Bubbles?
We've both been to all of them, yeah.
I meant loads of the others.
Oh, I thought you meant loads.
We do also really like London Super Comic Con. I've really enjoyed that every time I've been. But I should mention that we do know one of the organisers, or certainly I know one of the organisers, and we have volunteered there.
Yeah.
So James and I actually looked after Dan Slott's line.
You did, yeah. I helped look after the line as well.
I was trying to work out a way of making Dan Slott's queue sound rude, but I couldn't think of one.
Queuing for his slot? No,
it doesn't really work.
It doesn't, does it?
We didn't get to meet him, though.
And I think part of the reason why we favour Thought Bubble and London Super Comic Con is because we are in the middle of the south, the very south of England, and all the awesome stuff seems to happen up north, doesn't it?
Yeah, the north does seem better.
Yeah.
It's not grim up there at all. That's bullshit.
No, but there's a lot of one-day things where it's actually not really practical for us to go up. It's too far on the train for a day trip, and it's a bit much to stay overnight the day before and the day after. So whereas Thought Bubble was originally a one-day thing, now it's over 2 days, a weekend, and it is a bit more of a ritual, and there's lots of people there, so that we get so much out of going. So it's definitely worth the travel and you know, the hotel and everything else just for the experience. Whereas, you know, for other things which I've seen which look amazing, people talking about Twitter, just the local events, and you just think, oh wow, it's so cool if I could go to that. Oh, it's, you know, up in Liverpool, and oh, it'd take me all day to get there, and I'd miss it. And
stupid geography.
yeah, it does tend to be the northern side that gets it.
Maybe they're just more proactive about stuff. They've got to distract themselves from life more,
there, isn't it?
I think they've just got to distract themselves from life a little bit more. I should mention as well, James, we've talked about James a lot, and it would be easy if you haven't any experience of us to think that either he's made up. Most of the time I'm pretty sure he isn't.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Now. Maybe one of our imaginations has brought him into life.
And if you
maybe he's our self-loathing.
I'm self-loathing enough that, yeah, that might be the case. Also, if you are used to us, as far as we know, because we haven't been clear about this, as far as we know at the time of recording, he's not dead or anything.
No, God.
He's still alive. He's just not he's got allergy.
Yeah, he has a nasty cold, which, for new listeners, James and I work together. He does actually work on the opposite side of the office to me, and the lurgy has been there's 5 people that all sit together, and James is one of them. They all have this lurgy. It's making its way down. It's coming down the office. So it's only a matter of time, listener, before I suffer. I might just have to hide somewhere and hope for the best.
A couple other people who are absent friends that we should mention. Loads of people have given us loads of support, and you'll hear about those over time, I'm sure, as they get in touch with us once this episode goes out. But I have to thank David Wynn in particular, who, as well as being one of our very close comic friends and apparently official artist of the Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men podcast.
Oh, really?
Yes. That's an actual thing. It sounds like a made-up thing. But,
no, it's just...
but yeah, we thought he'd be ours for a while, but that didn't happen. I'm not gonna, it's cheap. I'm not gonna try and start a rivalry. That's a James sort of thing to do.
Well, that was in the old show. Let's leave it in the past.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll have our own rivalries. He did the music at the beginning of the show and at the end of the show. So, he did our theme. It's brilliant. I don't think it's got a name. It's just the We Have Issues show theme is what it is. Also, Michael Georgiou, who's a drawther, a comic creator who did Elemental Micah and a bunch of other stuff, has helped me a lot with the website. So if
you forgot to say all-round sexy guy.
He is an all-round sexy guy. He's his surname's Georgiou though, and a lot of the people in my family's surnames are Georgiou. So I try not to think about him being sexy too much, because it's kind of like finding one of my cousins sexy. And I've been in trouble for that before. So, I've got a lot of cousins. I'm Greek Cypriot. We've got lots of cousins. Loads. Thousands. Hundreds. Well, 100.
Well, oh.
Actually 100. Probably something like that anyway. So yeah, thank you to those guys. Thank you to all of the people who said kind things about the stuff we've done in the past. And hopefully you will join us on this as well. And if you do love us, please do rate and review us at iTunes, because apparently it's really important in the first couple of weeks.
Oh yes,
you can put us in front of people who go to the iTunes store and look at the new and notable. I can't imagine anyone who does that though.
No, I do.
Do you go to the new and noteworthy?
Yeah, it depends. If it's an area I'm not used to, and I'm like, I'm quite interested in that, I'll go and have a look and see what's there. I've done that.
What's new in baking podcasts or bacon podcasts?
I don't know.
Or no, I'm just guessing.
Oh, I was going to say no, I don't know. Guess. Yeah. Baking, bacon, muesli.
Swimming podcasts.
Yeah, flying.
Not comic podcasts though. There's
Dinosaurs.
only one comic podcast worth listening to, and that's Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men. Should we talk about comics?
Yes.
That's what we're here for. Oh, I should also mention at some point I'll cut this together so it's coherent. At some point this show, you will be listening to the dulcet tones of Peter Hammerson. I just want to mention that here. It's not up front. It's about 25 minutes into the show. But I just want to mention that here. He is starting a series of contributions for us about event comics. Crossovers and big epic events. And we will be having some of our friends and people we haven't met yet doing contributions for us. So get used to that, because it'll be happening. And you won't know when it will happen, except that we'll probably mention it.
Will they be ambushed?
We used to ambush people. I think maybe we need to be more professional.
All right, so we're not going to ear ambush.
No, not now. We're not going to maul their ears suddenly out of the blue there's just no way that whole sentence is going to end well. Do you want to talk about your comics, or shall I talk about my comics?
No, I'll talk about yours. It's fine. I'm going to talking about my love of independently owned small press comics. I'm going to talk about one which came out last week, but it's a standalone comic, so we don't need to worry too much about it being in any kind of continuity. Which is by Emond. Emond. And it's called Debbie's Inferno, and it's about Debbie, who likes. She's a lady who likes to sleep and to burp and to watch TV and to eat, and she likes her cat. Debbie is in bed, she's watching the TV, eating her crisps, and the room starts to fill up with water, and her cat can suddenly speak and tells her that, oh, Debbie, we've got to get out of here. And she's like, you can talk? And then the seriousness of her situation is like, oh crap, yeah, we need to get out of here. So she follows the cat pulls the plug, and they end up going into a different world. I don't want to spoil it too much past that. Basically, Debbie's going through some things to do with her life and evaluating things and trying to address certain things. This book perfectly picks up on every kind of self-loathing, depressing, sort of self-torturous emotion that you could have, and it portrays it in this really, really funny but very accurate way, leaving you feeling a bit like, oh, okay, Debbie, I know exactly what's going on here, because you can sympathise with her. It's a black and white comic, and the art's lovely because it's a real kind of rough around the edges, but really endearing, quite charming towards this part, and sort of really, really accurate for the story as well. Some really gritty moments where she's dressing parts of her in this really weird, fanciful world, but it just gives that edge to what she's actually trying to say to you as well. It's on Comixology. Okay, now listener, I'm not a huge fan of Comixology since they've changed their app, but due to my high-flying professional job.
Yeah, she's very busy.
No, it's quite hard for me to get to a local comic book store, so I do and for that point, Comixology is really, really useful. I really like it. Annoyingly, I can't just download it on my phone, which would be much more convenient, as you could do before. You have to go to the website. But don't let that deter you. This is a really good book. It is worth logging onto the store and buying. It was, I think it was £1.49. You get a very substantial story of this as well, so it's definitely worth checking out. It's really nice. This again was new. What's new? So it was on the front page.
You really do look at the new and noteworthy.
Yeah. Well, this is on Comixology. I wanted some inspiration, and yeah, I was sort of happy to give it a go, and I'm really pleased I did. I'm going to look out for other things that she's done as well, see if there's anything else that's worth picking up. But it was good, and I highly recommend it.
That's one thing that's good about Comixology, well, and the internet in general, regardless of how difficult or easy it is to use. There are lots of barriers between a comic like that one and the reader.
Yeah.
If all you've got is shops, because first they have to find a publisher who'll publish their stuff. Then that stuff has to be distributed, and then comic shops have to buy it and stock it on the shelves with enough copies that you'll definitely see one. So, and I don't use Comixology at all, so I just miss anything like that. I don't see it at all.
From that point of view, it was really, that is its biggest pro, it really is, but its cons are also quite large too.
I won't talk about this book for too long. Another little bit of inside baseball that I feel now that I'm comfortable and we're a little bit further into the episode I can mention is this isn't the first time we've recorded the first episode of this series, of this show. We did record a really, really good one last week that had James in it before he died and was imaginary. But it was really, really good, but we had technical difficulties. So, Jane has already heard me talk about this book.
That's fine.
It's Jim Henson's The Storyteller.
Oh, this is worth talking about again.
Yeah. The Storyteller, Jim Henson's The Storyteller Witches. It's the first issue of a 4-issue series. It's from Archaea, and it is $3.99, and I have a hard copy of it, which I bought from a shop.
Oh.
Which is kind of lucky because I don't
Oh,
think...
you mean hard copy as in an actual copy?
An actual copy.
Oh, I thought you meant there was a hard copy of the comic. I was like, oh, that's quite
No, a hard
excessive,
copy in Meat
but
Space.
Cute.
A hard copy that I bought in Meat Space where the real things are.
Meat Space. Meat Space.
And because it's Archaea, what I just said about Comixology is, I think because there's a connection to an old TV series, this was something that the local shop stocked. But Archaea are one of those companies they're one of the bigger independent companies.
Yeah.
They always do lots of really good stuff around Free Comic Book Day. They've habitually done the best book that's given away at Free Comic Book Day for the last few years. A lot of their titles just don't really get stocked in particularly decent numbers in comic shops.
No.
I think because they're quite a small company. Yeah. So I was quite lucky to get, I feel like I was quite lucky to get hold of this because I didn't know it was coming out. The Storyteller is maybe quite an old reference, but I'm really old, so that's okay.
You're just older.
Yeah, I'm just older. The Jim Henson's The Storyteller was a series in the 80s, I believe, wherein John Hurt, dressed as a very old person, he now is a very old person, but back then they had to put loads of makeup on him, tells a story to his dog, which is a Muppet. Or, I think Muppet is the name of the sorts of puppets.
Yes, they're collectively, aren't they? The
Muppets. But the problem is within the Muppets, there are also dogs and pigs and stuff like that.
I don't think Muppet specifically has to be a person puppet, does it?
No, I don't.
Because isn't that puppets?
I'm not sure
Maybe Muppets is a mixture of puppets.
I'm not sure what the specific DNA of them is.
I don't think it matters, following Miss Piggy and Kermie's relationship. I don't think is an issue.
Probably best not to think about it.
But maybe Muppets is mixed puppets.
A comic-y friend of mine recently tweeted, it's a guy called Bevis Musson, recently tweeted that he was watching a Disney show, a Mickey Mouse Clubhouse show, wherein Donald Duck had befriended a bunch of actual ducks, and it was just completely doing his head in. Like actual ducks that can't talk. But
isn't that like the thing with Goofy and Pluto?
It's kind of like that, but it's almost even weirder because these are... I'm not really sure. Is Goofy a dog or is he just a mutant?
They're both dogs.
I suppose they are. It's all very confusing.
Maybe there's different stages.
Of dogness.
No, of Disney-ness.
Well, so anyway, but the framework of John Hurt telling the story to the dog was just a framing sequence for them to tell fairy stories, like really magical stories, and using the medium of Muppets.
Yeah.
And when I say Muppets, I mean more like the sort of Labyrinth, Dark Crystal style Muppets they did. For the most part, it was more that sort of thing.
Wouldn't they be Fuppets? Fantasy
puppets.
Yeah.
Muppets.
No,
just
Muppet,
Fuppets.
Just Fuppets, yeah.
Okay. And it was great. And some of the stories were, the people who saw it when they were very young, some of these stories really stick with you. I'm not sure because I wasn't canny enough then and I haven't done enough research now, how many of the stories, they always seem to find stories you didn't already know. So I'm not sure how many of the stories were actual fairy tales that were just quite obscure and how many of them were just very similar to those old stories.
Right,
It all felt very
vaguely
authentically.
familiar.
Yeah, familiar, like familiar but different. You didn't feel like you were just getting the story of Hansel and Gretel or something like that. It was felt like old folk tales, but maybe ones that didn't really exist.
Oh, right, okay. Or the original story,
Possibly. And this is very similar, this comic. I was talking about a comic. I got a bit sidetracked, sorry.
It's the origin of the comic.
Yes, it is, in fact. This is very similar. The only real nod to the TV series, aside from the style of the story, which is authentic feeling, occasionally dark fairy tale that you don't know, but that feels like it fits with all of the ones you do know, is that towards the end of it, you get a couple of panels where you see a silhouette of a man telling a dog a story. That's literally the connection.
That's a nice nod.
But each of these 4 issues is going to be a different story of a witch. I think they're all going to be very different stories. Each one's by a different creator. This first one is written, illustrated, and lettered by S.M. Viduarri, who isn't someone I've heard of before, but is someone I will definitely be keeping an eye out for in the future. The story, although I've kind of given you a sense of what sort of a story it is, and that's maybe all you need to know, it's your fairly typical, but completely beautiful and original and not typical at all story about a king and a queen and a witch who got driven out into a forest, and a dark forest, and a king of the forest who's got a rabbit head, and promises and curses and legacies and predictions. There's a word for predictions, which is all of that was me trying to get to the word prophecies. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay, well done.
But I'm quite happy with that, so I'll leave it in. It's got all of that stuff in. It's got high stakes. It's got a kidnapped prince, and it's lovely. The way the story is told is mostly a sort of a storybook style, really gorgeous watercolor pages, not traditional comics not traditional comic panels and stuff like that for the most part. Lots of full page panels with gorgeous framing. The lettering is amazing and totally fits around and within the art. It perfectly tells the story. There are a couple of points where it does have speech bubbles and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's just a gorgeous storybook that, I wish you could trust a small child with a book like this, because it feels nice. It's got a real matte cover and stuff like that, because it's exactly the sort of story you'll want to tell a child, and the art is beautiful. The art reminds me at times of Charles Vess, who's done lots of stuff with Neil Gaiman. He did the original illustrations for Starstruck.
Oh, right, okay.
The original edition of that. And at times, a little bit like Jill Thompson. It doesn't really look like anyone else. These are just the people that it vaguely reminds me of.
Which is the sort of thing you'd want for a book that was telling you a fairy story.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's gorgeous, and I love it. And the next issue is by a completely different artist, and there's one picture in the back. It's by Kyla Vanderklut. Got the pronunciation of that completely wrong, probably. Completely new story, completely different story, and that looks gorgeous as well. It's lovely. I really like it. And the good thing is, because there aren't any really prominent Muppets in it, my wife might even read it. I haven't mentioned my wife. She really doesn't like Muppets. They kind of freak her out.
That's an understandable fear.
I think it's Fraggle Rock that done it.
That's an understandable way to get that fear.
And the Fireys in Labyrinth. I think she's kind of vaguely scared that they'll take her head.
That's understandable too.
Yeah, it is totally. These aren't actually irrational fears, are they? The other comic I got this week, it's the first part of a 4-part series. I never thought I'd buy one of these again, just because it's been a really long time since one has caught my eye and excited me. Dark Horse Comics, I guess because they're about to lose the Star Wars license. They've been doing Star Wars comics. They kind of made their name and their money, I think, way back in the 80s with Aliens and Predator comics.
Yeah.
And they are doing a sort of a push to a new push to have some Aliens comics and some Prometheus comics and some Predator comics and some Alien versus Predator comics.
Okay.
I think there's even these series are all notionally going to link up together.
I suppose it makes sense. They've kind of rebooted the film series a bit. Well, they've added to it.
Yeah. And I mean, they're including Alien versus Predator in there, but that whole idea did kind of start in Dark Horse Comics anyway.
I do ignore the fact that film exists.
The first one was really not good. The second one was all right, I think, but not that great.
Well, I wouldn't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm actually a huger fan of the two Predator films than I am of most of the Alien films, though. So.
I like... this is controversial. I like all of the Alien films.
Every single one?
Yeah.
I really like Resurrection right up to the bit where one of the characters that you thought was dead. We've talked about this loads, Jane, but where one of the characters who you thought was dead turns up just to explain some really obscure stuff that's going on.
But it's Joss Whedon, so
yeah.
I'd hope that people would understand that's Joss Whedon.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, it's good. We're talking about films, so we'll probably mention it again at the end. But Jane and James are doing a monthly podcast.
Yes.
Called?
Jane and James have been watching, sorry.
And they're going to be watching a film, and sometimes TV?
Yeah, film or TV, anything really.
That you can watch with your eyes.
Yep. And we take it in turns to pick what we're going to watch, and we are not allowed to tell the other person we have to watch it, and then we're going to talk about it afterwards. At
some point, James is going to stick you with a full-length Stone Roses concert or something like that.
I'm terrified of what... I mean, we had a conversation about Ender's Game, and I'm terrified about what he's going to make me watch.
You'll get a video retrospective of 90s guitar pop before you have to listen. It's
going to be worse than that.
But so once that's out, there is a mailing list, and I'll put that in the show notes. Once that's out, we'll talk about it on this anyway. Once the first step's out, we also James and I also do a podcast about being parents called Two Grown Men, and I do a podcast with life partner Steve. Jane's life partner Steve, not mine, called Unanswered, but we try not to talk about that stuff. Aliens, 1 of 4. It's $3.50 from Dark Horse, and I'm going to try not to talk that much about my issues of price on this episode, on this program, on this podcast. It's kind of a thing with me. Price, so I'll try. I reckon I'll make it 2 episodes before it will come up.
I think maybe you should accept your issue of the price, but not embrace it.
Yeah.
And that way you don't need to talk about it because it stresses you out a little bit.
Maybe it isn't me that's got the problem. Maybe it's comics that's.
You didn't even last an episode.
I haven't said anything yet. Not tangible. $3.50, which is a perfectly reasonable price point for something. It's the first part of a 4-part series. It's got a script by Chris Roberson with art by Patric, Reynolds, and colours by Dave Stewart. Not of the Eurythmics. Different Dave Stewart. We don't have to talk about this now because I'm pretty sure we don't agree about it, but I am one of the few people, I think, who, while accepting it is massively flawed, really likes Prometheus. I like some of the stuff that comes up in Prometheus. I don't have a huge problem with it.
I disagree. My problem with the film Prometheus was the body horror.
Yeah.
More than anything else.
Didn't need to be in there.
No, and the scene in question, obviously being on a lady, it was.
I know exactly what you mean.
It was extremely horrific to the point actually where it made me feel quite unwell. I had to leave the cinema for a second just to catch my breath and then go back in. It was very graphic and kind of, the tone of the film hadn't been that. Oh no, the Alien films really are horror films. I get that,
but that film could have been something different, and it didn't have to be like an Alien film.
You kind of things like that you have to be eased into, and it wasn't like a shock factor. It actually was just deeply unpleasant, and I felt really unnecessary, and that completely chucked me out of the film.
See, I didn't actually mind that sequence, but I agree that there was a lot of effort to make it that I think happened quite late in the day.
Yes, it did. Absolutely did.
To make it feel more like an Alien film, and I think that was a mistake.
It was.
But Prometheus is one of those things that you can end up talking about for hours. Not you specifically, just
Just, in general.
And I think we have in the past. So, but no, that's good. I think we almost agree on it. I don't agree. I don't think most people can see anything good in it at all.
Michael Fassbender was really good.
I like a Fassbender.
I do as well.
The reason I mentioned Prometheus, despite it being a bit of a can of worms, is, although clearly not with me and Jane, is, as I mentioned, Dark Horse have the rights to do the comics to this, and they're kind of bringing this all together. I get the feeling each of these series can be read completely separately from each other.
Okay.
But it does mention in the beginning, if you're paying attention, to the details, the references to planets and situations from the different worlds and the different cinema worlds are kind of linking. They're kind of unifying a little bit. So certainly in this first issue of this Aliens comic, what you get is a straight down the line Aliens comic, and probably one of the best I've read in a really long time, that really gets back to the basics of what made the first Aliens film really good. It's not trying to do anything really gimmicky or crazy, but it's just it establishes this situation where there's a colony on a planet. Yeah. You get that very strong feeling that you get from really good science fiction like this, that this colony is kind of on their own for a really long time.
Yeah.
They're isolated. There's a very frontier feel to it. And it starts with them trying to evacuate the base because there's an incursion by these aliens.
Yeah.
They don't know anything about the aliens. They just know that they're killing machines.
I guess, because the first Alien film was extremely atmospheric.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what you're getting from this first issue, is the atmosphere of what's happening. Because it is that anticipation, that tension of something going to happen, which makes that whole sort of... Is genre the right word? Yeah, genre kind of...
Yeah, I think it works. Subgenre, but
that subgenre work is that, and it is the tense anticipation and the atmosphere that both Predator and Alien have.
And it's really difficult. This isn't just a problem for the comics. It's really difficult for the films as well to maintain that when you've got more than one alien.
Yeah.
When you start it with lots of aliens.
Yeah.
But it manages to do it by transplanting these colonists to another environment. They manage to get off their one planet, and they end up in a different environment, but there's still the potential threat of the aliens, and they don't know this new place that they're in either. So, and that's kind of where I think it's starting to bring the different, they're not bringing the worlds together. They're just like saying, look, these all are happening in the same universe effectively. Hopefully this will stay quite separate, but I don't know. I might be being a bit naive.
Well, you can only give it a go and find out.
It says this series takes place before the events of Prometheus, Fire and Stone #1. So I guess the whole series is going to take place before that. So yeah.
Okay.
Probably standalone, which is good. The writing by Chris Roberson is really good. It does a good job of establishing the human characters. There are lots of them. You already get a sense of the dynamics between different characters are going to be causing them just as much problems, as the aliens do. People make mistakes, but they don't feel like bonehead mistakes. But maybe that's the magic of the medium we were talking about. When you're reading something, you fill in all of their reactions yourself, kind of. So there isn't 30 seconds of watching someone's face and thinking, well, why didn't they do this? They obviously had time to think about it. There's you time things yourself. And so characters are flawed, but they're flawed in ways that you can see causing problems between them later on, but they all make sense. The art by Patric Reynolds with colour by Dave Stewart is... I'm not very good at talking about art because I can only ever compare it to other people, and it always sounds like you're saying it's derivative. Well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm just being silly. It reminds me a lot of the things I really like about Michael Lark's art, in that the storytelling is great because it gives you a really good sense of space and where everyone is within that space. The characters, everything looks real. The faces and the expressions and everything. It's very naturalistic, I guess is maybe the right word for it. It's drawn, it's not cartoony. It's drawn in a very down the line way. I like Aliens comics I like them when they're a bit more like this, because I've seen the aliens in real life, so seeing them cartoony I'm not really making that point very well at all. But I really like, for this, I really like seeing these situations in this way, in a very grounded way.
Okay.
Because if it's set in space, I'm already in a very different world. I don't need to be distanced from it even further. Really reminds me of Michael Lark's art on Lazarus, which is only a compliment. It's really, really nice. And the aliens themselves tend to look better when drawn in a much more gritty, realistic style. Yeah. Mainly because when you draw them in a cartoony way, you end up defining them a lot more. You have to, you draw all the lines of every single thing, and it makes them less, one of the things about Aliens and Alien is you either can't see the alien in Alien. Yeah. Or they're moving so fast that they're just kind of a blur in Aliens. And that's when it's when they're the most effective, because that's when they're the most scary. It's really good. I really liked it. I liked it. So apparently I'm buying an Aliens miniseries.
Would you recommend it to listener?
I would, and I don't think you necessarily have to have liked Aliens that much.
Oh, that's good.
It's pretty good. I haven't read Prometheus.
That's a very pertinent point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it stands alone. There is a little recap, if you really, really care, of Prometheus in the front of it, but you don't. The characters know that these xenomorphs are monstrous and terrifying, and that's all you really need to know about them at this point in the story. So it's all good. I like it.
Cool.
Should we listen to Peter?
Yes, let's.
Hello. My name's Peter Hammerson, and this is Peter's Event Management. Comic book events, crossovers, epics. We hate them, right? Events are editorially mandated continuity messes, intercompany marketing ploys and money grabs. They promise that nothing will be the same, but rarely deliver. They spawn endless tie-ins, mini-series and specials, flooding the shelves and emptying our pockets. We hate them. Everyone says so. Except I don't hate them. I like a good event. I love a great event. And I can even quite enjoy a bad event. You see, I discovered American comics in the 1990s, as event comics reached what I consider to be their peak. I followed every crossover and event for years, and then travelled back in time, seeking out the events of yesterday. Landmarks in continuity, in publishing, and in the careers of the creators who made them. Event management is my journey through and my guide to the comic book events of the last 50 years. I intend to highlight overlooked events, praise the great events, and try and rehabilitate those lesser events that I believe still have merit. But today, I want to explain just what I mean when I say event, because I'm not going to just talk about Crisis and Civil War. I'm defining an event using 3 criteria. Number 1, crossover. The story must feature characters from more than one comic, perhaps more than one company, but be more significant than a simple guest appearance or cameo. 2, continuity. Not all events truly change things forever, but some do, and most change things for a little while at least. Births, deaths, probably more deaths than births. New teams formed, heroes reborn, villains redefined. Conventions smashed, status quos upturned. This is what I'm looking for. And number 3, consequences. Events should be big. Lives, worlds, universes must be at stake. The danger faced much greater than that which the characters will face in their day-to-day adventures. Longer, tougher, extreme. That's what an event is. So 3 criteria. Not all will apply to every story I cover, but most will. I hope to be imaginative in my selections, unexpected even. I can't cover everything because I haven't read everything, and I'll probably get the odd thing wrong. But I will endeavour to be as comprehensive and as accurate as possible. So that's all for today, but please join me next time when my eventful journey begins in an unlikely place, at a wedding. Thank you for listening.
Cool. that's Peter. Really careful listeners will know that we just put an edit point in there, and I don't need to mention it.
No.
We're professionals. Let's just pretend we just listen to it. It's fine. No, it's good. It's all good. Jane, you have a spotlight book to talk about.
I do. Technically, I'm going to talk about 2 books. Well, 3 books. One that's in real life. Okay. Oh, here we go. Past, present, future.
It sounds meta-textual.
Yeah, past, present, future. I'm going to talk about the trilogy, but one of the trilogy isn't out yet. So this is about that's my phone dropping on the floor. Sorry.
That's all right.
I need it for referencing things. It's, I'm going to talk about trilogy, but the final installment of the trilogy hasn't come out yet. And, these are books that I got for Christmas, which I actually got around to reading, and they were so good I really wanted to talk about them and talk about how much I'm anticipating the third part. This particular book I'm going to talk about is The Hive by Charles Burns. It's published by Jonathan Cape, and I'm so sorry, I don't know how much it was because it was a present.
That's okay.
The book, the first part of the trilogy was X'd out. I'm just seeing there's a price on the back. Oh, £12.99, an absolute bargain.
That's a really good price because it's a nice big hardback.
Yes, nice A4 hardback, really good quality paper and high quality production as well. Published. It's published to a high quality.
It's Jonathan Cape, a big boy publisher.
Yes,
I don't think they just do comics. I should just mention in the show notes to this show, and there are big show notes generally because I'm a bit OCD. I'm not a psychiatric professional, but that's a self-diagnosis. I will link to Spotlight Books in the show notes, and that'll be a link to Amazon. And if you buy stuff from there, it will help the show because we get like a penny for every £10 spent or something. Yay. It's really good. Sorry, Jane.
That's all right. The first book that went with this was X'd Out. In X'd Out, we met Doug, who is a struggling performing artist. We meet him in some very unusual circumstances. He's got his head's almost completely shaved. He's got a bump on it, and he's in a dressing gown walking through a hole in his bedroom wall. He ends up in a very strange other world. He doesn't quite know who he is. He's got vague memories of who he is. And he's kind of just settled into this life in this other sort of reality. Throughout it, we had snippets of his reality. So you very much got the impression that something very bad has happened, and this is his way of coping with it. In The Hive, we see him sort of resuming his life in his other world as he just sort of goes through his disorientated life that he's now has. He still doesn't really know who he is. He's still having these odd flashes of his life, and you get to see a bit more about him being I think it's in this one, you get to see a bit more about him being a performing artist and him being with a girl and how the girl, one girl's not particularly what's right for him, and another girl that's more right for him. I think that's the case. I've got that confused. It was a little while when I read this. Yes, that's right. Yeah. And so you've seen snippets of this. You've seen snippets of his family and how that's kind of impacted on him. But all along, the intertwine of this narrative is this really, really hyper real, distorted life that's going on around him. His, the thing that I really, really love about this book is the swap between what's reality and what isn't reality is really subtle, but really obvious at the same time. So his reality, the art is extremely, it's lifelike. It's the eyes are, lifelike. They're obviously drawn, they're lifelike, and the features are lifelike. But in the fantasy world, he's not. He's very cartoony. He looks. He's got dots for eyes and a little Tintin nose and a line for a mouth and things. He doesn't have that definition that he had. And you do find out that actually his cartoon or his fantasy persona is a lot like some of a prop he used for when he was doing his performing artist. His performing artist is he recites poetry to music, and the mask was to overcome his fear. and you just get the sense that something absolutely horrific has happened to him, something very bad. He's got no hair and he's got a bump on the head and X'd out, obviously speaks the volume of he's been knocked out. In his fantasy world, he's had to get a job and he's really not very good at it. And he gets bossed around. Sorry, listen, I'm just going back to this. He gets bossed around by this green, angry frog alien lizard thing. He just can't seem to do anything right. And he sort of Hive, as he is literally working in this hive, and in every room seems to be a woman that he's pregnant with multiple children, whether or not the human's another thing, but they're like the queen bees almost, or the queen of the hive. It's all very strange.
It's an allegory, it sounds like, but not sure what it means.
Yeah, it is extremely odd, and that's what I really, really enjoyed about it. There's nudity in it.
Yeah, you were probably counting on James being here because he'd be sat next to you, like, looking at the boobs.
Yeah, I really enjoy the boobs. He has got this very, he's got a girlfriend in his life, and things are strained, and he's recounting when he first fell in love with her and things like that. We don't know if it's something to do with that. That's been horrific. You don't know, like, oh God, what has happened? I don't want to speculate because I might accidentally be right.
Yeah.
But it has this real sense of, like, frantic tension. He is quite laid back in his fantasy world, but his reality is quite frantic, and there's some real extreme things that have happened to him. So you're almost worried. You're like, well, hang on a minute, he's woken up and he's gone through a hole in his bedroom wall. You don't know if this is real or not real. What the hell's happened to him? And the third book is actually due out next month, I believe. It does reference it, so I will just double check.
While you're doing that, do you get a sense that these are the questions, is the question of what's happened to him, does it feel like a central part of the story, the way the story plays out?
Yeah, it feels like there is a centre point, but everything's dancing around it. Yeah. You never get to see the centre point. So that's why it's a frantic, I want to know what's happened to him. Yeah. I'm like, oh God, what's happened? What is he sort of avoiding or anything like that? His fantasy world is so delightfully creepy, as well as odd. Some of the characters in here are just like, oh man, you're really funny looking and I really like it.
Charles Burns really good at that.
I know, I can't stop staring at you. I mean, I really poured time over reading these books. Just so much detail and just things, you just can't stop looking at them. The next instalment is Sugar Skull, and I think I read that it was coming out next month, but we will verify that and we'll put it into the notes.
Yep.
Don't let that deter you, though. I highly, highly recommend that you check out X'd Out in the Hive in anticipation for Sugar Skull coming out. Charles Burns is a drawther, so he has written the story. Drawther is a term that Momcast invented.
Was it you who?
It might have been James.
You or James, I think.
Yeah, that Momcast invented. That
we did.
We're going to transfer over to this show, which means that he has written the story and he has drawn it, and I believe he's coloured it as well. The art is exceptional. I really, really love it. As I've just said, the difference between the two realities is just lovely. It really, in a book like this where things are so odd and there are some shock scenes in it, it flows so nicely. You don't stop and think, oh, what happened? Where am I? What's happened? Why did this change? But I believe he did colour it as well. It doesn't tell me otherwise.
He probably done it all. Yeah. It's that sort of a book.
Yeah, and the colour's really, really nice as well. Really solid.
He's got this really weird, I haven't read that much by him, but it's this really weird, it kind of looks realistic. It's very bold and really thick inking that makes it look kind of weirdly 1950s-y. No, that's a really accurate thing to say, actually. Yeah, it is. It does feel very it does feel a bit retro.
Yeah, maybe, very retro, actually. Yeah, now you mention it. Maybe that's what gives it the nice sort of thick feel that it has. But the art's really good and the colouring is really good, and I can't wait for the next instalment. So I highly recommend that you haven't read it in these gorgeous A4 hardbacks. Really not very much money at all. I'm sure they're even cheaper on Amazon or whatever your local preferred choice of procuring books is.
We partly because of fiscal issues some of us have had, we quite favour libraries, don't we?
Oh yes, yeah, libraries. I'm not sure if this will be in a library.
You can ask.
But you know, what's the worst that's going to happen? You end up getting it, or you don't. You know, you haven't lost anything. You'll just gain things.
Just go to your library. They don't always seem that approachable, but librarians are really, good. They really care about what they're doing, some of them.
Yeah.
I guess like any other line of work, actually. I doubt they're special. No, they are special. I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm talking about. Thank you, Jane.
That's okay.
That looks awesome. It does I just can't get over how good value for money it looks.
I know.
It's chunky.
Yeah, it's chunky, and I've got the first two for Christmas presents. That's even better value for me.
We will probably do a spotlight. We'll probably have a spotlight book every week. But I don't know. I mean,
let's keep it free and easy.
Keeping it free and easy. We're not wedded to anything. We're not married to it. We're not married to any one format. We kind of, but also stability is good.
We don't have to answer to the man.
No, but stability is good though.
It is. I'm routine.
Yeah. If I was forced to vote yes or no for a completely different format every week, I'd probably vote no to that, just because it's safer. Sometimes a no vote is a vote for fear, but it's a good sort of fear that keeps us safe.
We can wrap ourselves in it at night.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much us done.
It is.
It's awesome. Thank you for listening. I'm just going to go straight for it, Jane. We don't need to do all the other stuff.
No.
Thank you for listening. If you want to talk to us online about this show, you can leave a comment on this post or on Facebook. There will be a Facebook page. It just hasn't been set up yet. Or on Twitter. Again, I'm Nick Sight. Jane is
Cover Jane.
And there's Issues Pod. Issues Pod is the Twitter thing. Email us at issuespod@gmail.com. Please remember to rate and review us at iTunes. There may be a few little bonus things coming out in the feed if you subscribe now. I'm doing what I can to really boost us in this first week, so I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think I'm not used to finishing shows anymore.
I think this is where we say goodbye.
We say goodbye, don't we?
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. That was good.